Thank you for watching QTV with the news. My name is SUMBWE. We take a look at our top stories. Transparency International Zambia TIZ has challenged the Anti-Corruption Commission to reopen the case against a named Ministry of Finance official linked to the 48 housing units it recently seized. Police say 20 gender-based violence GBV-related murders were recorded in the country in the second quarter of 2019. And UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema has given President Edgar Lungu 48 hours to establish the owner of the 48 houses seized by the Anti-Corruption Commission. And now the news in detail. Transparency International Zambia has challenged the Anti-Corruption Commission to reopen the closed case against the named Ministry of Finance official who allegedly owned 48 housing units recently forfeited to the state. Anti-Corruption Commission Acting Director General Rosemary Kuzwayo recently disclosed that the Commission has closed the case for lack of evidence linking Ministry of Finance official to the said properties. But TIZ Executive Director Wesley Chibamba has expressed shock that the Commission has failed to conclusively investigate the matter. Mr. Chibamba notes that there should be a proper record of who owns the properties. Therefore, the Anti-Corruption Commission should find the person who signed for the said properties as their rightful owner. He states that the Commission's reaction to the matter does not inspire confidence in the people for an institution that is mandated to fight corruption.
We believe that they have taken a very simplistic approach to this particular issue. By saying that it would be difficult to prove ownership of these properties is finding an easy way out, in the sense that we believe that there are legal provisions that mandate registration of these properties. They could not just have mushroomed from nowhere. There were procedures that were taken, there were processes that were engaged in for the land to be acquired and for the buildings to be erected, including registration with the utility companies such as ZESCO, Lusaka Water and Sewerage and others. At the Ministry of Lands, or indeed the local council, or with the real estate developer, want to believe that there is a proper record of whom these properties belong to. Someone honestly must have appended a signature somewhere, and if somebody signed for these properties as the legal owner, or if indeed is not a human legal owner, there has to be a legal entity that is behind these properties.
Meanwhile, President Edgar Lungu has instructed Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampiongo to ensure the case regarding the 48 houses is probed further. The opposition National Democratic Congress leader Chishimba Kambwili has charged that the Anti-Corruption Commission is incompetent and trivial. Dr. Kambwili has since challenged the Commission to up their game in the fight against corruption. He has expressed disappointment that the Commission has failed to trace and prosecute the owner of the 48 flats seized in Lusaka, believed to have been built using proceeds of crime. He suspects that the houses in question belong to a senior government minister. Meanwhile, the NDC leader has accused the ruling Patriotic Front of buying votes in the just-ended Luba Ward local government by-election in Kitwe. He claims the Patriotic Front used 1 million kwacha in the Luba Ward by-election, and Dr. Kambwili says some people are misinterpreting his Bemba idioms.
That's what I'm saying. In this country, we'll never fight corruption under President Edgar Lungu. My suspicion is that it must be a minister owning those 48 houses. And they were only put in the name of that civil servant. That's why they are given charges like concealing property, I mean, can we for once in Zambia fight this vice of corruption? We have taken the fight against corruption very trivial. That SCC can even go and tell us we failed to find the owner of the 48 houses. And let me say this, people are celebrating that NDC lost in Kitwe. PF has been in existence for 20 years. They manage 1,200 votes, which means per year they were recruiting 60 people. UPND has been in existence for 24 years. They got 512 votes, meaning they've been recruiting an average of about 15, 20 per annum. NDC has been in existence for 1 year. We got 213 votes. Which party is growing at a rapid rate? Obviously, it's NDC. 1 year in existence, 213. That's a big achievement. And it should send shivers in these people who have been in existence for too long, only managing 1,200 in 20 years. There must be shivering coming of NDC. And besides, PF used about 1 million watts to get 1,200 votes. We only spent 18,000 in that election. We got 213. Who are the victors?
Opposition UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema has given President Edgar Lungu 48 hours to locate the owner of the 48 houses in Lusaka's Chalala area, allegedly linked to corruption, and bring the culprit to book. Mr. Hichilema says the Patriotic Front government and law enforcement agencies should for once stop insulting the intelligence of Zambians on the recent case of who owns the 48 flats. He says it is appalling that the head of state and government quickly managed to know the so-called saboteur who cut one electricity pole costing about 300 kwacha in Southern Province, but cannot establish who built 48 multi-million worth of flats right in the capital city. Mr. Hichilema says it is unacceptable that the Anti-Corruption Commission has failed to identify the owner of the said houses when properties, particularly land, have a proper paper trail.
Can we for once stop insulting the intelligence of Zambians on the recent case of who owns the 48 mansions in Lusaka's Chalala Woodlands area? How can Mr. Edgar Lungu and his corrupt PF regime know the so-called saboteur who cut one electricity pole in some rural part of Southern Province? But he says to us he does not know who built 48 multi-million worth of flats right in the capital city of Lusaka. We are giving Mr. Lungu 48 hours to locate the owner of the 48 mansions and bring the culprit to book. We can't buy the nonsense being peddled that they failed to identify the owner. Properties, particularly land, has a proper paper trail. It has a parent file. Land shows who first owned the property and who was the second owner. It is not possible to fail to find the owner. The only suspicion we have is that these flats are connected to the corrupt elite in the PF. Zambians want to know, and they want to know now.
A total of 20 gender-based violence-related murders were recorded in the country in the second quarter of 2019, of which 11 victims were women, 6 men, and 3 girls. And during the same period, a total of 6,139 gender-based violence cases were reported countrywide, of which 583 were child defilement cases, 10 of which were against boys, with 573 against girls. Announcing the 2019 second quarter gender-based violence statistics, police spokesperson Esther Katongo says Lusaka province recorded the highest number of child defilement cases, with 250, translating to 42.9% of child defilement cases reported countrywide, while Southern Province recorded 81 cases, followed by Central Province with 60 cases, Eastern Province 58, and Copperbelt Province with 50 cases. Mrs. Katongo says 145 cases of rape and 19 attempted rape cases were recorded during the period under review, with 46 cases of indecent assault recorded, of which 38 were on women, 5 on girls, and 3 on boys. She adds that 1,756 cases of assault occasioning actual bodily harm were recorded countrywide, representing 28.6% of the reported gender-based violence cases, out of which 1,513 were female victims against 243 male victims. Mrs. Katongo states that of the 6,139 gender-based violence cases reported countrywide, 604 cases were taken to court, resulting in 83 convictions, 5 acquittals, while 48 were withdrawn at court and 468 are pending in various courts of law around the country. She notes that from the statistics, it is evident that gender-based violence cases have continued to rise, which calls for all stakeholders, including communities, to collaborate and heighten the fight against the scourge.
Out of the 6,139 gender-based violence cases reported countrywide, 604 cases representing 9.8% were taken to court, resulting in 83 convictions. 5 were acquittals, 48 were withdrawn at court, 468 representing 77.5% are pending in various courts of law around the country. 3,104 cases were withdrawn at police stations, while 2,431 under investigations, and this translates to 50.6% and 39.6% respectively of the reported cases. From these statistics, it's evident that gender-based violence cases have continued to rise. There are also a lot of cases being withdrawn, and we believe this is an impediment to the fight against the vice. There is still need for all stakeholders, including the community, to collaborate and heighten the fight against the scourge. We are alive to the fact that many more cases remain unreported.
Lands, Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Minister Jean Kapata says the draft national land policy will be finalized and submitted to Cabinet by the end of 2019. Ms. Kapata has told Parliament in a ministerial statement to update the House on the national land policy that the validation of the draft policy is expected to be held by the end of the third quarter of 2019. Ms. Kapata says the ministry's report on the recommendation raised by the chiefs during the Indaba of the 28th and 29th May 2019 was presented to the full House of Chiefs and adopted with new amendments. She explains that the House of Chiefs further submitted that they wanted to have representatives sit on the technical committee constituted to develop and finalize the land policy. Ms. Kapata adds that the Ministry of Lands is in agreement of the proposal and is waiting for the names of the representatives to be submitted so that the redrafting and editing process could commence.
Some of the organizations that have provided feedback are actually the Zambia Farmers Union, the American Chamber of Policy, and the House of Chiefs. Issues that have been resolved and agreed by the Royal Highnesses and the Minister of Land and Natural Resources are as follows. Number one, traditional authority be replaced by chiefs. Because in the draft document, we're referring to the chiefs as a traditional authority. And the chiefs felt that if we use this word, it will mean even the sub-chiefs will be included. And they didn't want the sub-chiefs to be included. So we removed traditional authority and replaced it with chiefs, wherever the traditional authorities come in. There are also the issue of the issuance of customary certificates, which the chiefs thought they must be uniform, they must be the same, just like the way the title deed is. So all customary certificates must be the same. So we are in the process of drafting how a traditional title will look like.
Government has launched the National Transport Policy and the 2019 to 2028 implementation plan aimed at providing the country with an efficient and integrated transport system by 2028. Speaking during the launch of the policy in Lusaka, Transport and Communications Minister Mutoto Kafuaya says the policy sets direction for priority setting and formulation of programs in the transport sector for the next decade and beyond. Mr. Kafuaya says the policy will spur economic growth through lower freight costs, reduced road freight dominance, integrated mode of transport, and mainstreamed non-motorized transport systems. He states that government is committed and determined to improve all modes of transport as demonstrated through investments and policy developments in the railway, aviation, and maritime subsectors. Mr. Kafuaya has since urged all players in the transport sector to appraise themselves with the policy measures contained in the policy, adding that his ministry will carry out a nationwide sensitization process of the policy to line ministries.
The vision for the 2019 National Transport Policy is, and I quote, to achieve an efficient and integrated transport system in Zambia by 2028, close quote. decision speaks to resolving the challenges that have for a long time inhibited growth in the transport sector over the years and maximize benefits for the Zambian people that come with improved infrastructure development implemented by the Patriotic Front government. Thank you. The National Transport Policy intends to spark economic growth through the following measures among others. 1. Lower freight costs. 2. Reduce road freight dominance. 3. Leverage on Zambia's location to be the regional transport and logistics hub in Southern Africa. 4. Integrate all modes of transport. 5.
And World Bank representative Wedek Silunga says the importance of the policy to the transport sector cannot be overemphasized, as no sector can thrive without a policy to guide its operations. Mr. Ilunga has since pledged the World Bank's commitment to supporting Zambia's transport sector and ensuring that the policy is effectively implemented.
We trust that this implementation plan will go a long way to ensure that the impact of the policy implementation will be to the benefit of all citizens of Zambia as well as visitors to your beautiful country, irrespective of the specific transport mode that they use. We also recognize that this policy would be meaningless without efficient and responsive transport agencies to give body to the policy requirements. Here, I note the support we provide for an institutional review of all road sector agencies. Just like the national transport policy needed adjustments to meet the demands of the changing world we live in, so must the road sector agencies adapt to changing requirements of the transport industry. The launch of this policy, therefore, is timely, as it will provide clear guidance to the institutional review.
Chief Justice Irene Mambilima has noted an increase in the number of people reporting their problems to the courts of law. Justice Mambilima says the Small Claims Court has proved to be a huge success for recovery of small debts, as people now know and trust that the courts will give them redress. Speaking during the launch of the High Court, Subordinate Court and Small Claims Service charters, Justice Mambilima has reiterated the judiciary's commitment to providing timely, accessible justice to the people of Zambia. She says access to justice is not a preserve of the rich, but that all aggrieved persons must have access to justice as it is their constitutional right. Justice Mambilima says the judiciary is redefining justice delivery to the public by being transparent and accountable in its operations.
I'm mindful that the charters are not exhaustive, but they highlight what happens in our 3 courts under consideration. As judiciary, it is our hope that our court users and the general public will find these charters useful, and we shall be happy to receive any feedback on how best we can relay information on the procedures and processes of our courts. As was stated, we still have the superior courts, the Court of Appeal, the Constitutional Court, and the Supreme Court. Distinguished guests, my remarks will be incomplete if I do not recognize the Judiciary Committee headed by His Lordship, Mr. Justice Jones Chinyama, which worked tirelessly to gather and compile the information in this simplified manner.
And speaking at the same event, Transparency International Zambia Advocacy and Legal Advice Center Board Chairperson Dr. Annie Chewe has reiterated the organization's commitment to work with all the stakeholders in government, the private sector, academia, and general public in finding solutions to the challenges of corruption the country is grappling with. Dr. Chewe says the development and launch of the service charters is a demonstration that the leadership in the judiciary is committed not only to improving service delivery but also to promote transparency, integrity, and accountability.
And we want to assure you of the support from Transparency International Zambia as you strengthen your integrity infrastructure in the judiciary. The work done and the launch of these service charters clearly communicate your intention, and we can only urge you to remain committed and stay the course. An independent and impartial judiciary anchored on the pillars of integrity, transparency, and accountability is a cornerstone of the rule of law and a democratic state. Guests of honor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as Transparency International, we remain committed to working with all stakeholders in government, in private sector, academia, and the general populace in finding solutions to the challenges of corruption that we are facing today as a country. We are fully aware of the adverse consequences that this vice has on the country and the ordinary people. We therefore applaud all efforts taken to turn the tide, and we urge other public institutions to emulate the judiciary in developing their own service charters. And
Center for Infectious Diseases Research in Zambia, CIDES, has been given the go-ahead to conduct research using a vaccine made from genetically modified material aimed at fighting diarrhea in infants. National Biosafety Authority NBA Communications Officer Sandra Lombe says CIDES will conduct research on infants aged between 6 and 8 weeks and will cover 1,500 children in Zambia. She says about 8,200 infants in 3 African countries, including Zambia, will participate in the vaccine trial aimed at reducing mortality rate in infants through diarrhea diseases. Meanwhile, Freddie Hirsch Group Limited has been granted a permit to import spices that may contain ingredients made from genetically modified organisms, GMOs. Ms. Lombe said on Wednesday, following recommendations from its Scientific Advisory Committee, the NBA board allowed Freddie Hirsch and CIDES to proceed with the importation of spices and conducting research respectively. Freddie Hirsch will bring in different varieties of spices, of which some are used in the production of sausages.
What will happen is that all those that will be getting the products from Freddie that they are using in their sausages, they'll be required to label them according to the law, because ideally they're supposed to make sure that every product that is made from ingredients that contain GMOs or that has been made from products that are genetically modified, they're supposed to be clearly labeled. Henceforth, whoever buys those and they are using them in their sausages, they will have to label them clearly. So we've allowed CIDES to go ahead with the research, which is aimed at fighting diarrhea in infants. The research will be conducted in children aged between 6 weeks and 8 weeks. The target group is about 1,500 in Zambia, and Zambia is one of the 3 countries that this trial is going on.
The National Action for Quality Education in Zambia, NAQUEZ, has condemned the continued incidences of examination leakages in the country. NAQUEZ Executive Director Aaron Chansa says the arrest of 10 people who were found with leaked exam papers in Matero marked a dark day for education in Zambia. Mr. Chansa is calling on investigative wings to establish where the culprits got the papers from. He has further implored the church and traditional leaders to voice out against the scourge, stating that the silence from the church especially is extremely baffling. Meanwhile, Mr. Chansa says his organization is happy with the recent announcement by Higher Education Minister Dr. Brian Mushimba that the Copperbelt University will reopen on 19th August 2019.
National Action for Quality Education in Zambia is extremely saddened, very disappointed at the continued incidences of exam leakages in this country. We are extremely worried that these leakages will continue to dilute the standards of our education. We want to take this opportunity to salute the Examinations Council of Zambia, but at the same time demand that the ECZ must thoroughly investigate this matter of Matero, the 10 culprits that were arrested. We must have a word from ECZ, and this word is about this country knowing where these 10 people got the leakages, so that we can be able to deal with this matter once and for all. And therefore, we also want to call upon the church and also the traditional leadership to come out strongly against exam leakages, because this is a moral issue and we need to speak against it as a country. Otherwise, the standards of our education The quality of our education is at stake. We are extremely worried as an organization.
The Christian Churches Monitoring Group says the failure by the Electoral Commission of Zambia to accredit its members and other non-partisan electoral stakeholders to observe the recent Katuba parliamentary by-election has the potential to reduce public confidence in the electoral process. Giving a post-election statement on the Katuba by-election at a media briefing, CCMG Steering Committee Chairperson Cleophas Lungu says despite complying with all ECZ requirements for accreditation, only 36 out of 62 CCMG parallel voter tabulation monitors were accredited. Father Lungu says as a result, the CCMG is unable to provide independent verification of the official results for the Katuba by-election. He has appealed to the Electoral Commission of Zambia to consider simplifying the accreditation process for observers and party representatives so that it is less onerous on the ECZ itself, citizen observer groups, and political parties.
Those not accredited had complied with all ECZ regulations. As a result of the ECZ's failure, CCMG was unable to deploy all of its PVT observers and cannot independently verify the accuracy of the official results of the Katuba by-election. This undermines the inclusiveness, transparency, accountability of the process, and reduces public confidence in Zambia's electoral processes. The ECZ should urgently assess its procedures and preparations for the accreditation of monitors and reform the accreditation process with an aim to allow greater accessibility and timely accreditation of non-partisan citizen observation monitors. CCMG recommends that the ECZ and political parties must enforce all codes of conduct and non-violence pledges and hold the perpetrators of politically motivated violence to account. CCMG would like to thank its 67 observers from our 4 member organizations who were deployed on 30th July 2019. Those not
Speaking at the same briefing, CCMG committee member Father Emmanuel Chikoya called for adequate preparations ahead of the 2021 general election.
The key thing is to ensure that the electoral processes are credible, they are transparent, and no one is left behind as much as possible. And so that then the outcome, when the process is okay, we will never eliminate problems, but at least we will minimize to a great extent all the possible challenges. So it's a wake-up call that we need to take note of. Maybe on the issues of journalists, any attack on the journalists should be strongly condemned. They have to be there, they're a critical stakeholder, and so whoever is involved, that is not the way to go. We need to make sure that our colleagues in the media are able to do their job, and any other person for that matter are able to do their job very well. We should, of course, note the improvement where the policing was concerned. I'm also making just comments on the area one. They were able to respond rapidly to instances, and at least that helped to minimize the levels of violence. And so that is to be commended. And for the police, again, that should be the way to go and build on, improve on it, and so that the people or the atmosphere is conducive for people to vote and do their campaigns.
Western Province Minister Richard Kapita says the province will host its first ever expo in June 2020. Speaking at the launch of the Homecoming Zambia event, Mr. Kapita says the expo will be held from 17th to 21st June 2020 under the theme Economic Transformation through Increased Homegrown Entrepreneurship, Value Addition and Trade. Mr. Kapita says the theme was arrived at after extensive stakeholder consultations and is aligned to the 7th National Development Plan, Industrialization and Job Creation Strategy, among others. He adds that the Homecoming Zambia event, which is scheduled to take place in Mongo from 6th to 13th August 2019, will act as a catalyst to business linkages linking investors to Zambia, in particular Western Province.
I must hasten to mention that preparations for the homecoming event next week have reached an advanced stage, and our friends from the United States of America are highly expectant of the visit, just as we are to receive them, ready to receive them in Zambia, in particular Western Province. You may also wish to note that in 2018, the Zambian delegation, as you heard from the minister.
Speaking at the same launch, Northwestern Province Minister Nathaniel Mobukwanu says that the homecoming event will help Zambians in the diaspora to reconnect and invest back in the country.
There could be a lagoon, Casa could be a small lake, or a small lagoon, or a small, but probably a little bit bigger than a pond. But anyway, there's some smaller reservoir mass of water that has always been collecting in one area, which was more or less like a permanent feature in that particular area. Because even me, I remember when I was growing up in my early days, when we were coming from the village, coming to Limurunga, there were certain routes that we could not use because either they were waterlogged or they were just not convenient. So one of the stopping points that we used in the recent time was that same Kasakamambari. Mambari, of course, was, I think, a derogative reference to the Arabs.
To end the news, recap on stories making headlines. Transparency International Zambia TIZ has challenged the Anti-Corruption Commission to reopen the case against a named Ministry of Finance official linked to the 48 housing units it recently seized. Police say 20 gender-based violence, GBV-related murders were recorded in the country in the second quarter of 2019. And UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema has given President Edgar Lungu 48 hours to establish the owner of the 48 houses seized by the Anti-Corruption Commission. On that note, we end the news. Pleasant viewing.